Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Kuf Memchet 148. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. We are discussing the gifts of a shchivmira, somebody who is deathly ill and is unable to get up and do anything. And as a result, effectively, we have given that person, and I think we covered yesterday some of the sources, or maybe it was 2 days ago, some of the sources for it. The idea, in general, people say that this is a rabbinic decree, although one could certainly read the Gemara as we learned it as suggesting that this is a biblical concept, that although ordinarily, in order to complete a transaction, we need to do an action.
Right.
For this person, because they're, God forbid, on their, potentially deathbed, then we're going to allow them to make a gift that is conditional on their death and does not require an acquisition. So that's what we're going to allow them to do. And we said that there are two. We're going to have a more Rashbam, a good amount of Rashbam today. And we're going to, and the bottom line is that we're going to highlight that if you give, we've seen that if you give away all of your possessions, if one were to give away all of their possessions when they're on their deathbed, and then they get better,
Right.
well, then thankfully you get to keep all your possessions. But if you give away 98%, 99.9% of your possessions, and you only retain that 0.1%, since you retain something, effectively we understand that you mean it to be a real gift. And that's it. You've given it away. You don't get it back. You don't get it, you get what you get, and you don't get upset. Okay, so let's pick up again. So that's the gift of a shchiv meirah. Again, ordinarily, if you give a gift of a shchiv meirah and the person gets better, the gift gets canceled. We concluded yesterday by noting that if a shchiv meirah wants to give the fruit of a tree to someone, it doesn't work without giving the tree, as the fruit is something that doesn't currently exist. And so on that note, and based on a Tosfos understanding, we now pick up on the seventh line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh line, third word from the end of the line, Iboilahu. So they ask a question. This is again Daf Kuf Memchet Amud Aleph. Iboilahu Dekel le'echad uperosav le'acher mahu. If again, we'll call him John. John, on his deathbed, says that he wants to give his dekel tree to Mark, and but he wants the fruit to go to Stan. So what's the story? Do we say that when and let's take a look, because the Gemara now explains it. Misher makom pere oloshier. Did when John gave the fruit to Stan, did he retain for Stan a little bit of the tree? So as a result, when Stan gets the fruit, what is really getting is the buds or the location where the fruit will grow on the tree, and the rest of the tree belongs to Mark? Or do we say that he didn't leave over, and therefore, when it comes to Stan, it's a gift? Hold on, we'll talk about it afterwards. When it's a gift of something that does not yet exist, and a gift of something that does not yet exist in rabbinic law and in Torah law is not a gift. Exactly. So Stan ends up with nothing from John, and Mark ends up with the whole tree. So that could be one possibility. So imtim salomer la. What? Well, you get the fruit. It's a date tree, so you get lots of dates. Do you like dates? Yeah. Nah, all right. Dates are very sweet though. But okay, you can give them to Mark. Yeah, all right. Imtim zelomar. If you say, oh, I like date cookies. Okay, imtim zelomar. Okay. Oh boy, that's expensive. All right, imtim zelomar la'acher lo havishir. Now, what if we were to say, an imtim zelomar means that let's potentially answer that in fact Stan is left with nothing. That we're going to say that that John did not leave over in his deathbed gift anything for Stan, and so as a result, his gift for Stan of the fruit does not work. So if you say that, Latzmo mahu. What about if he does it for himself? So John says, now, of course, this can't be a deathbed gift any longer because, and this is why Rashbam gives a different explanation. It's too complicated to get into now, but Rashbam gives a different explanation. But the bottom line is he retains for himself some amount of the fruit. So do we say that in that situation he's retained the location of the fruit, so obviously he can keep that? Or do we say, no, you can't do that? That's a davar shelo ba'olam. So Rava Amarav Nachman imtim salomer deka le'echad u'perosov la'acher. If you want to say that the person says that you can give the dekel goes to one and the fruit to another, lo havishir makom pere. We say that the person who's giving it doesn't leave over any space. Dekel le'echad v'shir perosav lefanab. If he says that he's giving the dekel to some other person, but he's holding on to the fruit for himself, in that situation, sheer makom peri. Then we say, yes, he did leave for himself the location on the tree where the fruit will grow, and so as a result, that will work. My taima, why? Kol legabi nafshe ba'ayin yafa mishayir. Because when somebody leaves something for himself, when anything involves the owner himself, he's going to leave over, he's going to be generous. We've seen this topic, the ayin yafa, ayin ra topic before, and it raises interesting interactions with that discussion. Because before we saw that there were opinions that said that you sell and you give things ba'ayin tov. And if you give things with ayin tov, that implies that you retain things with an ayin ra, or potentially. So how is this consistent? Well, for that's more of an Ian discussion than a discussion for Daf Yomi. So I'm going to leave that for you to think about and to consider. So that is topic number one. So topic number one is that if you if somebody gives something, if somebody gives somebody a tree and retains for themselves the fruit, they have successfully done so, and because they are retaining for themselves the location on the tree where the fruit is going to grow. New topic. Actually, a new topic that is related to the topic that we're just going to have. The Gemara is going to record an alternate version of this kind of exchange. So again, the exchange had two steps. First was if you did something with somebody else, and then if you did it for yourself. So let's take a look. So Amarle Rabbi Abba Rav Ashi. Rabbi Abba said to Rav Ashi, Anan ad Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish masnisin hala. That this kind of conversation, we learned it in connection with Reish Lakish. Then what did Reish Lakish say? To Amar Shimon ben Lakish, hamocher bayis lechavero. If you sell a house to your friend, va'amarlo, and you say to him, Amanash diyuta hel yona shali. I'm holding on to the rooftop, so I want to stay onto the diyuta. Diyota, we'll see, is a rooftop. We're going to get that. Take a look in the last Rashbam on the page. Diyota, he aliyah ha'elyona. This is the upper level. Sha'al gag habayit, that is on the rooftop. So it's some kind of structure on the roof. We'll see that it means that there's a roof, there's at least a wall around the rooftop. We'll see that shortly. So if you say that you want to hold on to that rooftop, diyuta ha'elyona shalo, the rooftop gets held onto. So if I sell you a house and I say I'm keeping the rooftop, the rooftop does stay to mine. Now that's true, even though when you think about it, the rooftop isn't a thing, right? There's the house is yours. The roof belongs to you, but I get the usage. And so even though that might be considered like a davar shelo bala olam, we're going to say that he gets to use it. So ibailahu. So they ask the question, bayit le'echad udiyota le'echad mahu. So what if I were to stand the house and say that I'm giving the rooftop usage to Mark? Would that work? Mi havi shiur olo. Have I held on to a part of the house that the sort of the surface level, the top, millimeter of the rooftop so that I'm really giving Mark an object? Or have I not given anything? Or have I not held anything back from Stan? And therefore, because I haven't held anything back, when I commit to give Mark the access and the usage of the rooftop, I've given him nothing because all I've done is make a promise, and promises aren't anything without some kind of separate kinyan. So imtim tzalomar bias le'echad udiyota le'echad lo havi shiur. And so if you say that, in fact, again, this is the parallel language that we saw just a few moments ago. And again, we're on now kuf mem chet amubet. If you say that, in fact, that in that situation, I have not withheld anything for Mark, and so Mark does not get the access to the usage. Chutz midiyota mahu. What if I use the language when I give you, Stan, the roof, the building? I say except for the rooftop. Then have I withheld the rooftop, even for myself or for Mark? Let's take a look at the Rashbam. Ibailahu bayit le'echad. So what happens if I say one house to one person and the rooftop to another? So this goes on the question. But matanas bari, we're talking about now a healthy person giving something away. Vidiyuta la'acher mi havi makom shiur. When I now give hold and try and give the rooftop to Mark, have I held back something? So mi ika lahai bal diyuta shir makom bechatzer. Did Mark get some space within the courtyard, lahotzas zizin, so that in fact he can put his beams on top of the roof? Oh, low or not? And imtim tzalomer lo. And if we say that he did not get that space, lo havishir la'achrini, aval la'atzmo havishir, but for himself he has left. Kagon de amar le bias ani mocher lach chutz midiota halyona. And I say to Stan, I'm selling you the house other than the rooftop. Odilma lekashur. Do I not get? And so, according to the Rashbam, the question here is not so much about whether or not Mark will get the rooftop access. And the reason that it's not about that is because we saw a long time ago that actually, if I sell you the house and I just say I'm selling you the house, I am not necessarily selling you the rooftop. That in fact, the rooftop does not get included in the house. And so as a result, ordinarily, because again, it's viewed as like a separate apartment, a separate space. And so as a result, I would get to use it. And so as a result, the question that the Gemara is asking, according to the Rashbam, is actually, can you put beams on the rooftop that stick out over the courtyard underneath? Meaning, can you effectively build a cantilevered building? You know, you sometimes see it where a building is wider at top and over a space underneath it. There are a number of buildings like that in Manhattan. So can you do that or not? That's the question. And even if we say that when I sell the house to you and I give the rooftop to Mark, that Mark doesn't have the ability, what about for me?
We saw something like this, I remember, in our study with the cisterine and the bore.
Exactly, the cistern and the well. Exactly, exactly, 100%. Same kind of analogy. That if you sell a field, you haven't sold a courtyard, you haven't necessarily sold a cistern and the bore. That's exactly right. So 100%. So Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman. So now we get the answer to the question. In the situation where we'll say that actually, if I give you, Stan, sell you this house, and I give the fence rooftop to Mark, that we have not left that I have not left for Mark the right to stick things out into the courtyard. chutz mediyuta, if I use the language of except for the courtyard, havishir. Well, in that situation, I would be leaving things out, and therefore he would be able to use the courtyard he would be able to cover the courtyard with his beams. Va'aliba de Rav Zvid, and this is similar to Rav Zvid de Amar, who said, She'im ratzala hotzi bazizin motzi, that if the owner of the house wants to to have beams extend from the roof over the courtyard, he can do so. Whoa. Alma, Kavan Deshire Diyuta, because he left himself the Diyuta, left himself for the rooftop, Mekom Zizin Nami Shire, he therefore also left for himself a place for the beams. And this is exactly, and so now let's take a look in the Rashbam. Avaliba de Rav Zvid, third line down in the Rashbam. The key Amrle Stama Bayazani Mocherlach, because if I were to say to Stan, I'm selling you the house, Lo Kana Diota. Stan does not get the rooftop. Ha'el Yona, up above. As we saw earlier on Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph on 61a. Lo Machar Esagag. You did not sell the roof. When there is a fence around it that is 10 tfachim high. Dahainu diyuta, and that's what a diyuta is. The ki amarle chutz, and when I add the words chutz, well then litfuye milsakasi. He's trying to hold something more back, right? If I say except when I don't need to, then I'm trying to hold myself something additional. And so what am I holding additionally? I'm holding back for myself the right to stick beams over the courtyard. From the rooftop. Over the courtyard that the purchaser is buying, over the backyard of the house. So, or the front yard. So, okay, so there we go. So that shows that that was a different way that we could have this same conversation, but about a very different topic. Obviously, the first topic was more about shchiv mirah. The second topic is about selling a house, but the same conversation we saw in those two contexts. Okay, so enough of that, and now back to the rules of gifts of a shchiv mirah, and we're going to have two teachings now from Rav Nachman. So let's take a look and see.
How are they separating the rooftop itself from the ceiling of the house?
So holding anything from the ceiling of the house is definitely going to that's definitely Stan's. When I sell Stan the house, he gets everything inside the house. The only question is my ability to, one, use the rooftop, and we're going to assume that the answer is yes on that. So if I sell him the house and we say nothing, I get the use of the rooftop if there is a rooftop structure. Meaning if there's a fence around it or maybe a little hut up there, that is not included in my sale to Stan. Stan knows that, and that's the key here, of course, is that the community understands that's the understood meaning of a house. The meaning of a house is everything from the roof and underneath it, and not necessarily the rooftop itself. But when it comes to, hanging a chandelier in his bedroom or dining room, 100% he'd be able to do that because he gets everything inside the house. That would certainly be included in it, but that's a good question. Okay, so now we're going to have, again, two statements in the name of Rav Nachman. So the first, and the statements are made by brothers. We have Rav Yosef Bar Manyumi and Rav Acher Bar Manyumi. So let's take a look. Let's see what Rav Yosef says. Amar Rav Yosef Bar Manyumi, Amar Rav Yochanan. So Rav Yosef says in the name of Rav Yochanan, Shechiv Mirah, Shekasav Kol Nechasav La'acherim, Rowan, that if a person signs away all of their property, we have to take a look. And what are we taking a look? Im b'mechalek, if he has truly divided all of his assets, and it was clear from the beginning that his intention was to divide all of his assets. So then when the person dies, kanu kulan, then all of the assets get acquired. And amad chozer b'kulan. And if the guy gets better, well, then he gets all of his stuff back. But The im benimlach, if he was changing his mind, meaning, and let's take a look. You know what? Let's take a look in the Rashbam first. Im b'machalek. Take a look. It's the second line in the narrow lines of the Rashbam on Kuf Mem Cherem Bet. Im b'machalek. Shemisha Rishona, from the very first moment, Shehilchil L'chalik, that he began to divide his assets, Hayabedaito, he had the intention, L'chalik Kol Nechasav, he had the intention to divide all of his assets, V'lo L'shayar Klum, and not to leave anything out. If that's the case, well, then the statement that we made is correct. Then all of the assets go if the person dies, and all of the assets come back if the person survives. However, 3 lines down from that, or 2 further lines down from that, im ben nimlach, if the person changes his mind, shelo hayab, again in the Rashbam we're staying, shelo hayab b'daito l'chalek kol nechasav. He didn't have from the very beginning the intention to give everything away. El achar shechilek shasak, but rather after he gave away this piece, he was quiet. Below ratza l'chalek od, and he didn't want to give anything else more. But then chazar v'nimlach, and then he changed his mind, and he goes back, and he gives out everything that's left. So he did it in a bunch of, the person owns fields A, B, and C. So there's a difference between my saying field A is for Lori, field B is for Mark, and field C is for Stan. And then there could be a situation where the person says, I want to give field A to Lori. And then 5 minutes later, you know what? I also want to give field B to Mark. And you know what? I also want to give field C to Stan. In that situation, it's different. When the person gave field A and field B to Mark and Lori, they weren't giving away all of their possessions. So as a result, in that situation, Mace, if the person dies, Kanukulan, of course, everybody acquires. But Ahmad, if he gets better, Eino Choser El Ba'achron. No, they don't all get canceled. Because when he gave the gift to Lori and Mark, he wasn't giving everything away.
Right.
It was only your gift, Stan, that, sorry to say. Lucky you. Only your gift was the gift that sort of finished all of his assets. And so only that gift gets canceled. Okay? So now the Gemara asks the obvious question. How do you know? Vidilma ayune kama ayin v'hadar yahiv. Maybe the person was doing some real deep thinking and was just figuring out, well, this person's got these assets, that person's got those assets. I want to make sure that the division is equal and fair and good, etc. And so he's doing all this thinking, and that's why it took him a long time to say, field A goes to Lori, field B goes to Mark, and field C goes to Stan. Maybe that's what was happening. So, and let's take a look in the Rashbam. Nichush, this is, you know what, let's do also El Ba'achron. Rashbam does a nice job of explaining it. We're going to do 2 Rashbams. We're now 9 lines down in the narrow lines of the Rashbam. Last word on the line is Ella. Ella Ba'achron Bilvad. Only the last one, Delo Havi Bashir, where there was nothing left over, there, that's where he's going to get it back, where the person who was on their deathbed and gave the gifts to Lori, Mark, and Stan, that only field C that he gave to Stan will he get back. Aval Kamai, the ones that came first, the ones to Lori and Mark, Kanu, Mark and Lori would get them. Because as we learned in our Mishnah, Shir Karka, if any land is left over, Kol Shehu, any amount, Matanato Matana, his gifts are a gift, and so those gifts would go through. Okay, so now, Nechush, why aren't we worried that in fact maybe it was just he was doing some thinking? Dilma Hai Deshasik, V'chishev, maybe that which he was quiet and thinking, Bein Matana and Matana, between giving the gifts, Lo Havi Kinimlach, he wasn't changing his mind. Ella Iyune Ma'ayin, he was thinking about it. He was thinking deep thoughts. What should he give to everybody? Oh, Mark, they could use your help. Okay. Umikara, yeah. Okay. Umikara haya bedaito l'chalek es hakol. And so, see you later. And so, as a result, from the beginning, he had the intention to divide everything. V'yachzor kishiyamod michal yav v'amai kanu al kamai. And so as a result, why should this acquisition even work? Okay, so the bottom line is that why do we know? How do you know from the fact that it takes a person a little bit of time to say A to Lori, B to Mark, and C to Stan, that he's actually changing his mind? So the Gemara answers, Stame deshchivmira midik dayek v'hadar yahiv. That before somebody who's on their deathbed starts giving away all his possessions, he has done that thinking. He's not going to think about it on the fly. And so as a result, that's why we're going to say it. And take a look at the next Rashbam. You know, that this is the Rashbam opposite. There's in the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, there's the letter Dalet in the Gemara, opposite the letter Dalet in the Gemara. Stama deshchimira iyune kama'ayin belibo mayitain lekol echad kodem shiyavo lefanav. That before he has everybody come in front of him and make his deathbed wishes known, he's going to have thought about it. Ve'ein lo lishtok bein zelazeh. So therefore, there's no reason for him to be quiet between gifts. Umedishasak. And given that he was quiet, nimlachavi, he was changing his mind. He was thinking that he was just going to give away some, and then he decided to give away all. So that is statement number 1 in the name of Rav Nachman. Now, statement number 2 in the name of Rav Nachman. Again, this is by Rav Acha, Amar Rav Acha bar Manyume, Amar Rav Nachman, Shchimera shekasav kol nechasav la'achevrim. If you wrote away all of your if an ill person is a shchivmira, somebody who's on their deathbed potentially, wrote away all of their assets, the amad, and he gets better, eino chozer. Whoa, eino chozer, he doesn't get back his property? Chayshinan shema yesh lo nechasim v'minas acheres. The reason is that we're worried because maybe he has property elsewhere. Now, of course, this undermines the main principle of our Mishnah, right, which is our main principle is that if you give away everything and you get better, you get everything back. So how could that be? And that's exactly what the Gemara asks. When we said in our Mishnah that if you gave away everything and didn't retain anything for yourself, how can we find that case? And so the Gemara offers 2 answers. One, Amar of Chama ba'omer kol nechasai, where the person uses the language of all my possessions. So if, in fact, they actually say all my possessions, and let's take a look in the Rashbam, ba'omer kol nechasai, lo chilek sedosav b'karamav l'kol echad b'fnei atzmo. He does not give each field and vineyard individually. Elo lashon zeh kasav, but rather he wrote with this kind of language. Kol nechasai ani notein leploni uploni. I'm giving all my possessions to Mark and to Lori. The kol heka de isnahu nesunim lahain. That anywhere they are given b'matana as a gift. V'ein kan shir. And so in that situation, nothing is left. Ube perish Rabbeinu Chanano gares kol nechasayai elu hein v'lo nehira. Now, Rabbeinu Chanano suggests that it had a different girsa in the Gemara where it was kol nechasai elu hein, that it's all of my possessions consist of the following. But the Rashbam doesn't think that that's the correct language, so we'll stick with what we had, which is that if, in fact, the person on their deathbed says that they want all of their possessions to go to somebody, then we won't worry about the fact that maybe the guy owns property somewhere around the world. Okay, a second answer, Mar Baravashi Amar, b'muchzaklan deleslay, where we already know. We know the properties that this person has because we know the guy's never left the town. So as a result, it's clear he doesn't have property anywhere else. So if we have a chazaka that the person doesn't have property elsewhere, so then we won't worry about it. But if we don't have that, well, then we will worry about it, and we'll say that any gift that was given is going to be considered a gift and will not be conditioned on the person's death. Okay, so now that we've been talking about that, the Gemara asks a question about a partial retraction after all the possessions were given to one person. After all, again, you need to give all the possessions. So what if I say, what if the person who's on the deathbed says, I should say, always John says, all my possessions are going to go to Mark. And then he says, you know what? I actually want field C to go to Stan. What's the story? Do we say that when he says that he wants field C to go to Stan, he has retracted completely from his gift to Mark? Or do we say, no, he still wants everything to go to Mark, and now it's except for C. Except for the C, he wants to go to Stan. Those are the two possibilities.
Right.
So let's take a look and we see which one it is. Ibailahu. Chazra b'miktaso, havi chazar b'kula olo. If I retract with respect to a part, meaning I give field C to Stan, do I retract the whole thing or do I not? So Tashma, let's take a look. Let's take a look in the Rashbam. Ibailahu. Chazara b'miktas, shchiv mira. Again, we're now talking about a deathbed, somebody who's seriously ill. Shekasav kol nechasav le'echad. He writes all of his possessions to one person. B'chazar bo b'miktas, and he retracts partially. V'nasan shuv la'acher, and he gives that retracted piece to somebody else. Shahari yachol, which he can do. La'asos kain. He can do that. Kida amrinan daitike. Mivatelas daitike. We have the rule that one written document that gives possessions of somebody who's on their deathbed to one person can contradict an earlier one. But Pirkin Delael, as we saw earlier in the previous parak on Daf Kuf Lamed Hey Amud Bet. Mi havi chazara b'kol anachasim. Now, would that constitute a full retraction of the gift to Mark? Shanasan Larishon, that was given to the first guy. De Gully dated to Mecharet, that he feels bad about it, Barishon, the first guy, that he feels bad about giving it to the first guy. Umasha Nasan Lasheni Matana b'miktsas. And now we'll treat what was given to the second guy as a partial gift. And as a result, he Deika Shiur, and so there's leftover property, Vahavya Matana, and now it's a full-fledged gift. Va'asu Yorshin Umafki Miyad Rishon, and now the heirs of the person who was on their deathbed get to go back to the first person and take back all of that possession. Kol Amoser, everything else, everything other than field C. Oh, lo, or do we say no? Havi Chazar, lo Havi Chazar, or do we say it was not a full-fledged retraction of the gift to Mark? Elamasha Nasan Lasheni, Kana Sheni, Van Noser, Kana Rishon. But rather, what the second guy gets, and everything else, the first guy gets. V'im Yamod, and now if the guy gets better, Michal Yav, from being sick, Yachzor B'Shneihem. All of it goes back to the person who was on their deathbed. Sharei Lo Shir La'atzmo Klum, because he didn't retain anything. So, Tashma. So we're going to try and bring a proof. Kulan Rishon, if a person says that all of his possessions should go to person A, person number one, Umiktasan Lasheni, and then only some of them, and then he says that some of them should go to person number two. So again, he's done exactly what we're talking about. Sheni Kana, we say that the second one makes an acquisition. Rishon Lo Kana, the first one doesn't make an acquisition. Myla Bishames. Well, what are we talking about? It must be that the person died. And right, if the person died, then this can make sense. Because what did the person do when he gave field C to Stan? He was retracting his gift to Mark. And so as a result, the only gift that stands when the person dies is the gift to Stan. So that's and let's take a look in the Rashbam, fourth of the wide lines towards the beginning of the line. Mylav Kishames Ukatani Harishon Lokana. The first guy doesn't make any acquisition. Alma Chazara b'mixas Havi Chazara. This shows that a partial retraction constitutes a full retraction of the original gift. Bekulo, completely. De'ilo Havi Chazara, because if you didn't say that it was a Chazara, Tarvayu Liknu. Both of them should make an acquisition, B'kol hanachasim, with all of the possessions, right? Because again, if A and B would go to Mark and C would go to Stan if we don't say that the gift to Stan constitutes a retraction of the full gift to Mark. And now we answer lo bisha amad. No, we could say that we're talking about where the person gets better. Umashani, as we're continuing on in the Rashbam, now fifth line in the wide lines of the Rashbam towards the beginning of the line, and we answer lo. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Lo olam lo havya chazara. Maybe really, we're not talking that there was no we're talking about where he got better, and there was no retraction of the original gift. Ubaraisa, and this brisa, kisha amad, is when the person got better. And hilkach, sheni kana, debatana b'mixas. And the second one will get it. Now, this is going to be problematic and contradict what we said earlier, but this is the Hava Amina of the Gemara. Maybe we'll say that Stan gets it because when he was given field C, it was only part of the possessions. And so as a result, Stan gets to keep the gift, even if the person gets better. So as a result, lo matzi hadarbe, therefore he doesn't have to return it. Kidikatani masnizin, as we learned in our Mishnah. Aval barishon, but when it comes to Mark, when he was given it, shenitno lo kol nechasim, he was originally given everything. And so as a result, since he was given everything, below shear, without anything left over, im amad, if the person gets better, choser, he has to give it back. Kiditanan b'masnizin, as we learned in our Mishnah. Ulakam and parchina. Now, the Rashbam recognizes that you have the following question, and he notes that we're about to ask this question. And what's the question that we're about to ask?
How can he get it back? How can he get it back?
What?
And the first statement that if he gives away most of it, but he retains part to give to a second individual, you said, Stan, then didn't the Mishnah say if he decides I'm going to retain something, he gets better, he doesn't get anything back?
That's correct. That's correct. But remember, when he gave everything to Mark, he gave everything to Mark. And so as a result, when he gets better, Mark has to give everything back.
Correct. But if he says he retains something.
Right, but that we're not dealing with. He didn't say.
No, the second case, he says he's retaining some of it for the second person. So why is it different to retain something for a second person versus retaining something for himself?
Well, because when you retain something for a second person, you still end up with nothing. And we're going to see that if you still end up with nothing, if John says, I'm giving all of my property to Ken and to Moshe, then he has ended up with nothing. And even though half goes to you, Ken, and half goes to Moshe, we're going to say that if he gets better, he gets it all back. Okay, it does make a difference whether he's leaving over for himself or if he's leaving over for somebody else. If you leave over for somebody else, that's not leaving over. Okay, so now it's back into the Rashbam. Ulakam parchina. We're in the middle of the sixth wide line of the Rashbam. Ulakam parchina, and we're about to ask Ikasha Amad, if the person gets better, Tarvayu lo liknu. Both Stan and Mark should have to give back their property. Ba'afilu sheni, even the second guy, even Stan, the Kevan, the Chazra, b'mixas, because he just retracted a part of the gift. Lo havya chazura b'kola. We just said that that's not a full retraction. So Gabi sheni leika shiur. So also for Stan, there's nothing left over. Daha lo hadar be mirishon, because he didn't retract his gift to the first guy. He didn't retract the gift to Mark. So if he had only 3 fields and Mark's getting A and B and Stan's getting C, the John is left with nothing. And so as a result, if he gets better, both Mark and Stan need to return their property. Ela b'masha nasan l'sheni. Ubain shnei hen nasan akol. The only thing left when relative to Mark is what he gave to the other person, and between the two of them, it's all been given away below shear, and nothing is left. La'atzmo, for himself, klum at all. Umehacha pashtinan, and that's why we're about to end up learning. We're going to end up seeing b'maskana at the end of the Gemara. Chazara b'mixas havi chazara. It must be that a partial retraction constitutes a retraction b'kula of the entire original gift. So if somebody gives to Mark everything, A, B, and C, and then says, you know what, I want to give C to Stan, he is actually retracting his gift of A and B as well. Hilkach, Bain Shemes, Bain Shama, doesn't make a difference whether the person dies or gets better. Shani Kana, Stan gets the acquisition. So last time, Stan, you were the loser, but this time you're the winner. So Stan makes the acquisition of field C, Shaharei Chazer Bo Mirishon, because he undid his gift to the first guy. Legamri, completely. Vishir La'atzmo, Shir Nekasav. And so as a result, he's retained for himself an inheritance, an estate. Shenasan Larishon, which he had given to the first guy. V'chazerbo, and now retracted. Mehen. Umatana b'mixas. So now, as a result, the gift to Stan is a partial gift, and a partial gift, Shma Matana, is considered a full gift. So we now know where the Gemara is going to go, and although we understand the Gemara's current thinking that maybe we could talk about, say that this Bryce is talking about when he gets up, we know already that this is going to be problematic. And that's exactly, and we're going to see that in just 2 seconds. But before we get that, we initially are going to say, Hachinami Mistabra. It actually makes sense to say that the Brisa that we're talking about is where the guy gets better. Because Medikatani Seifa. Because listen to the end of that Brisa. The end of that Brisa says the following. Miktasan Larishon. You give field A to Mark, the Kulan Lashani, and then you give everything to Stan. Rishon Kana, everything else to Stan, I should say. So you gave A to Mark and B and C to Stan. Rishon Kana, the first guy gets it, Shani Lo Kana, and the second guy doesn't get it. Well, Amra Bishlam Kisha Amad. If you tell me that the guy got better, this makes sense. Because when the gift was given to Mark, it was a partial gift. And so as a result, the partial gift to Mark is a full-fledged gift that does not get retracted. But when now Stan gets B and C, well, now Stan's gift was a complete gift. And so if the guy gets better, Stan doesn't get it. Mishum Haki, Shani Lokana. That's why the second guy doesn't acquire. Ela Amr Bishames. But if you tell me that we're talking about where the situation is that the guy died, Tarvayu Liknu. Both of them should acquire. A Mark should get field A, and Stan should get B and C. So the fact that it doesn't means that we have to be talking about where they get better. So now we get to the point that we were making before, that Amar le Rav Yemer le Rav Ashi. Rav Yemer says to Rav Ashi, V'tehevei nami b'sha'aman. Fine, you got it. You're absolutely right. It's got to be where he gets better. But Iyamar bishlam chazara b'miktzasa havya chazara b'kula haynu d'sheni miyas kana. So, but still, when we said in the first part of the brisa that if John gives everything to Mark and then gives C to Stan, and we said that Stan gets and Mark does not. That only makes sense if we say that when Stan gets C, John is retracting from his gift of A and B to Mark. But Elai Amrat Chazar b'mixas lo havya Chazar b'kula. If you were to tell me that when John transfers to Stan field C, he is not retracting A and B from Mark. Nehevik kimachalik. Isn't this case simply a case of dividing the property? And therefore, when you're dividing the property, it all gets returned. Ulachad minayu lo liknu. And as a result, nobody should acquire if the person gets better. And in fact, the Gemara does not answer this question that Rav Yemer says. And therefore, the Gemara concludes, V'holchaza chazara b'miktsas havya chazara b'kula. If John were to give A, B, and C to Mark, and then say, you know what, I changed my mind, I want Stan to have C. If he isn't explicit about A and B, he has retracted his gift of A and B. And as a result, because he's retracted his gift of A and B, the gift of C to Stan is a full-fledged gift and is not a matana shchevara. It's not the gift of a deathbed gift. And as a result, if the John gets better, Stan still gets to keep field C. Okay. So, Ibailahu. Now we're going to have...
Then there's no difference, essentially, between saying he's keeping it for himself, or he's keeping it for somebody else.
No, there's a very big difference between
No, if
keeping.
he were to say he's keeping it for himself, he gets nothing back.
Oh, if you mean, if the person were to say, I want to give A, B, and C to Mark, and then he says, you know what? I don't want Mark to have A. I want to retain A for myself. Then you're absolutely right that either, well, if in fact we treat it as a retraction, so then you're absolutely right. Then no, then everything gets retracted, and he's given everything to A to Stan, and so he has effectively retained everything. But let's deal with the following situation.
But if he says I'm keeping part of it for myself, and he keeps 99%, he says he's keeping 1%. In the end, he gets better. He gets nothing.
Correct. Correct. So if in fact he says, I'm giving A through Y to Mark, but I'm keeping Z, then even if the person gets better, Mark gets to keep A through Y. Correct. Absolutely.
He keeps,
exactly right.
he keeps Z too. He doesn't get anything back, right?
No. The person said he's retaining Z. Right? So John says he's retaining Z. So if John says, I'm giving A through Y, A, B, C, D, all the way to Y, I'm giving all of that to Mark, but I want to keep Z. In that situation, if John dies, then his estate is only Z, and A through Y goes to Mark. And if he gets better, same situation. A through Y have been given to Mark, and all he has to keep is Z.
Oh, he does keep Z.
He does keep Z.
I thought he doesn't.
He
gets
keeps what he
nothing back.
retains. What he retains for himself, he keeps. Okay.
Oh, when we said he gets nothing back, it means he gets nothing of what he gave.
Well, nothing what he gave, exactly. Doesn't mean that he keeps nothing. It means that he gets
But if
nothing
he gave
back.
everything away, he gets everything back.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
So
Okay,
in this case, if he's retaining something for somebody else. I'm giving all this away and retaining a small piece for somebody else, 1%.
So the question
so that second person gets to keep it, right?
No, it depends. It depends on what his mental state was. If he says that I'm giving, again, now we'll use you and Moshe. So I'm giving, if John says he's giving 50% to Moshe and 50% to Ken, and he says that at one time, then he has left for himself nothing. And as a result, if he gets better, he gets it all back. But if he were to say, I'm giving 50% to Moshe, and then he thinks about it and he says, you know what? I also want to give 50% to Ken. Well, when he gave the original 50% to Moshe, he was retaining something for himself. He didn't have Ken in mind. He didn't have you in mind, Ken. And so as a result, in that situation, Moshe gets to keep even if the guy gets better. But Ken only gets to keep if the person passes away, because the gift to Ken was the completion of giving away all the rest of the assets.
So he gets it back.
So he would get that back if he gets better. Exactly. Okay, so now we're going to have two questions. Ibailahu, hiktish kol nechasav, if you make all of your possessions. So now obviously we've been talking about giving property away. So we're going to first talk about making something hektish, and then we're going to say then we're going to ask the question about and then we'll talk about the wording. So we're going to actually ask a series of 3 questions. First hektish, then hefker, ownerless, and then giving it as tzedakah. And the question is, do we say that any of those situations are more of are not are such important things, are so good that the person's intention is to do them completely, even if he gets better? So that's the question. Hiktish kol nechasav. You've made all of your possessions consecrated for the Beis Hamikdash. V'amad. And now you get better. Mahu. What's the law? That whenever you give something to hektish, people do so with complete intention. And so as a result, his complete intention was to make this happen, even if he got better. And so therefore he gets nothing back. Odilma, Kol lagabi nafshe lo gamer umakne. Or maybe when it comes to himself, he never is going to give everything. He's not going to give everything away. And so as a result, he will never have that full intention. And hifker kol nechasav mahu. Now, what about, and Rashbam explains, and if you want to say that in fact this does work with respect to hektish, what do you say about making things hefker? If you were to make all of your possessions hefker, would we say miamrinan kevan da'afla aniyim ka'ashirim, that look, both the rich people and the poor people could get it, and in particular, the poor people can get it, and as a result, I really want the poor people to get it, so gomer umakne, and so therefore, I have the intention that it should work. Odilma, no, kol lagabi nafshe lo gomer umakne. Again, when you have some interest involved, you aren't going to have the full intention to give it away. And chilek, all right, so in that and let's say that situation works. Well, then what if chilek kol nechasav la'aniyimai? What if you gave all of your possessions to the poor? Do we say that that's really a gift, and as a result, a gift gets coming back? Or miamrin tzedakah vaday migmar gamar makne, that when it comes to tzedakah, he first certainly has in mind. Odilma kol lagabi nafshe lo gamar makne. Or do we say again that when it comes to oneself, we don't have that kind of intention? So teku, all of those questions are unresolved, and notwithstanding the Rashbam's Imtim Salomer, and the fact that we often will hold like the Imtim Salomer, the Shulchan Aruch says that in all of these cases, the rule is just like a gift, meaning that if he recovers, he gets everything back. Okay, we'll skip the parentheses. Amar of Sheshis, and we're now going to deal with language questions. We've been talking about if I give it to you as a gift, if I use gift language. Now, what constitutes gift language? So the Gemara now details. Yitol, if a person should take. Yizke, he should take ownership of. Yachazik, he should take possession of. Yikne, he should acquire. Kulam lashon matanahin. All of these are languages of gifts, and therefore they will work in terms of a shchiv merah trying to give away a gift on his deathbed. B'masnizan tana, we have a brisa that learns af yachasin v'yeras, a yichus, an inheritance, and a yeras, and both kinds of inheritance is b'roi liyarsho. When it comes to somebody who is fit to inherit, that will work. So again, because those languages are languages of inheritance, it will work. The Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, and this is consistent with Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, who says that that if somebody is an heir, you're allowed to reapportion the estate so that one heir gets everything, and so as a result, that works. And the Rashbam again reminds us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. So Ibailahu, they asked as we turn to Kuf Mem Tedamud Aleph, Ya Yehane Vahen Mahu. What if the person says that the person should benefit from the belongings? Denehevi Kulo Matana Kamar, is he really saying that it should all be a gift, and he just is adding that the person should benefit? Odilma Lishane Minaihu Midi Kamar. He's just trying to give him benefit, and benefit is a davar shaloba, is a davar that doesn't actually exist. It's not ein bo mamish. It has no substance to it, and so as a result, it doesn't work. So yera vehen mahu. And similarly, what about if you were to say the person should be seen in the property, or yamo behen mahu, or he should stand in the property, or yisha ein behen mahu, or he should rely on the property? In all of these cases, teku. We're unsure of the answer, and the Shulchan Aruch says that these do not work. Now, if you're wondering that what about if the shchiv merah sells his possessions or admits his possessions belong to somebody else rather than giving them away? Well, that's the topic for tomorrow's daf. So stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So if the guy retains, let's see. If he retains.
I'm going to stop the recording, and then if you have a question, happy to deal with it.